Hey everybody, Dr. Sherrod Robbins here, constitutional scholar and founder of ConEye, where we take a constitutional eye toward everyday life. Since the start of the 47th administration, I've been receiving lots and lots of questions about executive orders. So I wanted to take a moment to answer some of them for you. I'll also be dropping these as smaller videos throughout our social media pages, so feel free to watch them there if that type of approach is a little bit easier for you to digest the content. So without further ado, here are 10 con questions, Executive Order Edition. Let's go.
Now I ain't looking for handouts, I'm looking to stand out. Got the vision coming, watch how it pans out. I've been writing my plans down, trying to stay focused, put out the notice. Who the GOAT is, me hands down. Yeah, no time for arguments, I cut out the politics, no. It's all my competence, I could cause your apocalypse. Ambition, it ain't for the weak, get it even when I sleep. Ready and willing, what you ready to see. But I'll find a way, with or without you. Oh, you try to make me stay. No, there's nothing you can say.
Question 1. What is an executive order exactly? So this is a one-sentence answer. An executive order is a directive in the form of a document issued by the President of the United States that guides the functionality and the direction of the federal government of the United States and sometimes its affiliates. Question number 2. Are executive orders the law of the land? Executive orders are not the law of the land. Executive orders have the effect of law, and although they have the reach of the nation, they are indeed bound by a limited scope. Question number 3. Who do executive orders affect? This is a good question, and it's an important one because I think it's the question most people are asking when they are talking about executive orders. Executive orders directly affect the federal government and its executive branch employees. Meaning, if you work for the NSA, the National Security Agency, or the Department of Justice at large, then the executive order, in fact, becomes law for you. However, executive orders also draw a straight line to those entities who contract and subcontract with the federal government, such as schools, hospitals, small businesses, nonprofits, and even states and cities themselves. Question 4. What is considered a contract? This is a great question that never gets asked. And it's so important, so incredibly important in this conversation. In law, a contract is simply defined as an agreement between parties creating a mutual obligation that is enforceable by law. This agreement spells out the expectations of each party and requires what's called consideration, which is essentially the promise of one party to do or not do something in exchange for the other party's promise to do or not do something. All contracts require consideration. Question 5. Are grants considered contracts? And if not, am I safe? Actually, grants are considered contracts, all right? They're an agreement between you and the federal government to responsibly carry out your mission in exchange for their federal funding. Generally, there are contingencies attached to grants, and that's totally normal, such as, I'll promise to give you this amount of money if you promise to use it for this thing over here, like science or education research. However, what the federal government can do, and is doing as of 2025, is saying, even if you meet the minimum requirement to receive this funding, such as using it for science and or education research, I'm only gonna promise to give you this funding if you also denounce all things diversity, equity, and inclusion, simply because we, the federal government, don't believe in it. You can see how such an approach could become really problematic to a lot of groups and a lot of people. Question number 6. Okay, so I'm confused. Do executive orders have a direct or an indirect impact on my organization? I don't work directly for the federal government. Well, in that case, that one is actually kind of up to you. If you are receiving federal funding in your organization, then you have to abide by the executive order so long as it's in effect. However, if you don't need federal funding, then you essentially need not abide by the executive order, as the punishment for not doing so was essentially the rescinding of that federal funding. But remember, states are sovereign entities, and they were framed this way for a reason. So if you can get your funding from an alternate source, like a private organization, or from the state itself, then you can keep on keeping on. Question 7. How long do executive orders last? Legal, lawful, and constitutional executive orders last at minimum the length of the president that's in office. However, any future or current president can rescind, revoke, or essentially end any executive order that's on the books, no matter how far back it dates. The only thing that would prevent those executive orders from being overturned, or at least elements of them, is if Congress were to pass the language of that order through law. Question number 8. Okay, so can executive orders be overturned? And if so, how? This is another good question. Executive orders can be overturned in one of 3 ways. Number 1, after the president's tenure in office comes to an end, subsequent presidents can take it upon themselves to rescind, revoke, or essentially end that individual president's executive order or past presidents before them, no matter how far back they are dated. Number 2, Congress may nullify said executive order by passing a law that essentially renders it illegal. Now, this is unlikely to happen during the tenure of the president who passes said executive order because they are generally in alignment with the Congress who is from their same party. And number 3, after careful review, the courts, and in particular the Supreme Court, can determine an executive order to be unconstitutional. This can take time though, anywhere from months to years for the case to pass through the US court system and land in front of the Supreme Court, assuming they want to hear the case in the first place. Number 9, do executive orders affect me as a private organization? This is another good question and another one with a couple of answers. On the one hand, no. Executive orders do not impact or affect or implicate private organizations, as private organizations are beyond the reach and the scope of the federal government, unless the executive order includes the language of contractors and subcontractors. Then private organizations could be implicated. This takes us to the other hand, in that private organizations can be affected by executive orders if they are in a contract with the federal government, likely receiving federal funds. So if the private organization or institution is in a contract to receive funding from the federal government, then they themselves are technically a contractor or a subcontractor and therefore have to abide by the rules and the laws and the language of the executive order. Question number 10. What happens if I don't abide by the demands of the executive order? Well, if you are a direct employee of the executive branch, you can risk losing your job. We've seen this happen with employees who did nothing other than have the language diversity, equity, and inclusion in their job titles. If you are a contractor or a subcontractor, though, then it is likely that the agreement that you all came to will cease to exist. So for example, right, if the grant contract that you entered into with the federal government was for, I don't know, $300,000 to continue your science and education research, and the federal government says, we're happy to give this to you so long as you don't use it to engage in trans identity and trans studies and any of its adjacencies, and you decide to do so anyway, then it's likely that the federal government will stop giving you the money, cease all interaction, and remove it from your budget entirely. That's all for today. I hope you found some answers for what you were looking for. This is a very broad topic with a very narrow focus, and I'm sure there are tons of other questions you have, so please don't hesitate to send them my way, even if you want them to be on a different topic. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more Con questions. Till next time.
Now I ain't looking for handouts, I'm looking to stand out. Got the vision, come and watch how it pans out. I've been writing my plans down, trying to stay focused, put out the notice. Who the GOAT is, me hands down, yeah. No time for arguments, I cut out the politics, no. It's all my competence, I could cause your apocalypse. Ambition, it ain't for the weak, get it even when I sleep. Ready and willing, what you ready to say? But I'll find a way.